Welcome back to Film Buff Bros. Today, we're discussing our top prisoner of war films.
Before we dive into it, guys, please subscribe to the channel so you can continue watching more awesome content like this.
We upload one video every week, so please smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any episode. Okay, so my number 3 pick for top POW movies is Schindler's List. Some people might not consider it a POW movie, but it takes place during a war, and these people are enslaved essentially, and they're prisoners. So Schindler's List. One of the reasons that I like Schindler's List so much, and I think it's one of the best POW movies, is the performances, namely Ralph Fiennes, I believe his name is, Liam Neeson, and Ben Kingsley. I find all of their performances highly convincing, and let's start with Fiennes. He conveys that despicable character extremely well. When he's looking at himself in the mirror, his brow position and his eyes, he conveys that sadistic and apathetic character with grandeur and subtleties as well. Every time I watch the film, I hate the character just as much as the first time I saw the film. And Ben Kingsley, I think he did his role perfectly. He plays this stoic, humble, compassionate, fearful, defeated man who's just trying to survive day to day in the Holocaust. And I think that Ben Kingsley conveys that performance with excellency. Liam Neeson, his character, Oscar Schindler, more complex. For me, when I first watched the film, I was wondering, is this guy really just trying to profit off the war, or does he actually care about the people? And as the movie progresses, you see that he does care about the people, and I think that he plays that transition well, that experience of transitioning from having the audience wonder whether or not he's a good guy. I found that by the end, I actually had sympathy for Neeson, whereas in the beginning, his character I was kind of on the fence about. So I think that it's a difficult role to try to play for an actor, to have that arc, or the audience has experienced that arc and you're wondering whether or not he's a good guy or a bad guy, and I think he did that tremendously. Another aspect that I like of Schindler's List is that it's black and white. And I find that it seems historical and that it indicates the lack of vitality found in the Holocaust, and it helps in conveying the bleak and dismal environment of the forced labor POW camp. Further, I think that the lack of color influences the audience to pay attention more so to the performances and not be distracted by fancy cinematography. Last but not least, the story I find extremely compelling, and it will really tug on the heartstrings of any good person. If you've seen the movie, for obvious reasons, it's extremely sickening and uncomfortable to watch, but it's an important part of history. And I think that Spielberg delivers the movie in as palatable of a way as you can with such brutally sad and tragic subject matter. So I think that Spielberg did a masterful job on that movie. My number 2 pick for best POW movies is Rescue Dawn, directed by Werner Herzog and starring Christian Bale. First reason why I like it so much, the performances. The weight cut that they had to do, I guess that could be considered part of the performance, more so part of the preparation, but it makes their performances extremely convincing. I find Dwayne's character, played by Steve Zahn, quite convincing. He has a kind of a more flat way of behaving in the movie. His character is really defeated and he doesn't show a lot of emotion, whereas Jeremy Davies' character, Gene, he's so defeated but in a different way than Dwayne. You see that senility has kind of set in his personality. He's ultra paranoid, but also really hopeful that they're going to get rescued. And I think he's lying to himself, thinking that it's going to happen when maybe really that's the only way that he can get through the day. And Bale's performance as Dieter Dangler, I like how the character is really optimistic and hopeful and strategizing and tries to stay positive and help keep his co-prisoners entertained or hopeful. As per usual, Bale's performance is very dynamic and realistic, and you can't help but really feel for the character. Another feature of Rescue Dawn that I really like is the scoring, or lack thereof. It's sparse. It's typically used to transition from one scene to another, kind of setting up the mood of the scene. But most of the sound that you hear is the jungle sounds, birds and bugs and whatnot. And the scoring, when used, it's light sounding instruments, not orchestral fully, or symphonic, I should say. There's violins, cellos, and a bit of tribal sounding drums, but it's very minimalistic, and it lets the acting and the cinematography tell the story, opposed to desperately trying to use the music to enhance the movie, because the movie by itself doesn't even really need a score. The performances and the cinematography are top notch, so I love the scoring in this movie. The final aspect of Rescue Dawn that I'll discuss is the cinematography. There's a variety of different types of shots. You get long shots, close-ups, medium shots. I was watching a movie the other day, and 90% of the shots were medium shots, like chest, torso to head. I find it not very stimulating, and in Rescue Dawn, there's such a variety of different types of shots. You're getting shoulder-mounted shots. It's like kind of not a POW thing, but it kind of makes you feel like it's a documentary and you're with them in the jungle. And there's tripod shots, there's crane shots, there's Steadicam shots. I find it very compelling when there's many different types of shots. There's slow zooms, and also the lighting is natural, like when they're in their little bamboo cell, there's moonlight coming in and there's lanterns lighting them up. So there's lots of different types of lighting, and also they didn't suck the saturation out of the film. I found in a lot of films, this one I'll name Hereditary, when they're in a kitchen or different places that would normally be lit a lot, they turn off the lights, sucks all the saturation out, and the entire movie is like that. And I get it, it's a horror movie. They're trying to convey this mood, but really the story and the performances should speak for themselves, and you shouldn't need to do those type of tricks to creep out the audience. Whereas this movie, it's lit naturally. The jungle is bright. The little makeshift prisons are dimly lit and naturally lit. So I like how the cinematography conveys the story in a realistic way. So my number one top pick for best POW movies is Spielberg's Empire of the Sun. And my number one reason for liking the film so much is Bale's performance. John Malkovich, great performance too, but Bale being the protagonist really carries the movie, and for a child actor, it's mind-boggling how he's able to do it so well. There's lots of emotional points in the movie for the character, but I think something that should be noticed is the arc of the character, namely going from a spoiled, aristocratical, elite, higher, upper class son of colonizers in China, going from that to being a completely destitute prisoner of war and having to wheel and deal in order to survive. That arc has to be tough to do. He essentially plays two different roles in one movie, the spoiled brat and the destitute POW, and that performance of Bale is mesmerizing, sensational, and top quality acting in my opinion. The second thing I'll discuss about Empire of the Sun is Spielberg's direction. Virtually perfect. I can't think of any flaws in it, honestly. The editing and cinematography, phenomenal. The timing of the editing, how they convey the transitions from one scene to a next and one act to a next, is second to none. And the cinematography, such as like the overhead shots, really expensive looking shots, the smooth pans, the realistic lighting, flawless job by Spielberg on this one. And again, the scoring on this movie is subtle. There's more scoring than Rescue Dawn, but it's used sparingly. It's sentimental, classical, and fitting for the historical era. So the scoring on this one, again, 2 thumbs up.
So for POW films, number 3 for me would be The Hill, starring Sean Connery. It's directed by Sidney Lumet. It's from 1965, black and white. It's a pretty bleak film. There's no music in the movie. You just focus on the sound design, the breathing of the men on the hill as they're climbing. It's a very relentless movie. It kind of feels like you're there, like you're trapped. Very long scenes, sort of like the movie 1917, where you stay in the scene a long time and there's no escape, just like there would be in POW camp. One of the things I thought was interesting was this POW film actually had the prisoners turning on each other and fighting each other rather than banding together. Some great lines in the film.
Any more trouble? And I'll read you the riot act. You know how long it takes? And if that doesn't have any effect,
And I also really like the ending of this film. Up until the last few seconds, you don't know what's going to happen, and then it kind of thwarts your expectations, and it has a pretty tragic ending. Number 2 POW films for me would be King Rat from 1965, directed by Brian Forbes and starring George Segal. Again, this film has very minimal music, which I think works good for POW films. It more focuses on the realistic sound design, the crickets at night, the rat screaming, the sound of an egg frying. Again, very interesting editing cuts in this film, clever dialogue, realistic and natural humor. George Segal has a charisma in his performance, and he's got sort of a schoolboy charm to him. Standout scene is where they are eating something. I don't want to say what it is to spoil it. It's not something that humans would typically eat, but they're desperate. And that scene is a huge standout scene for me. They're almost in a maniacal, orgasmic state of mind as they're eating this. The score by John Barry was also, like I said, minimal, but effective. The ending was surprising. I think it did well in depicting how prisoners' psyches change in war and after war. So number 1 POW film for me would be The Deer Hunter from 1978. It stars Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken and a bunch of great supporting cast. It's a refreshing take on the POW genre. It's sort of an original format. The first half takes place before the war, and the second half takes place after the war. But in the middle of the film, there's this absolutely intense POW scene. So I thought it was great that they showed the beginning before they go to war, and they show the innocence and the naivety, but also how they feel empowered and are actually kind of eager to get out there. The POW scene at the POW camp is very well known. The prisoners are forced to play Russian roulette with their captors. It's one of the best exercises in tension in a film. It really captures the desperation of the prisoners. As for the acting, it's one of De Niro and Walken's best performances, in my opinion, especially in the POW scene. It's sort of just this quick thing thrown in the middle where in that scene the characters know that it can all be over very quick. And so that gives it, I think, a realistic quality to it. And then the hopes are up when they seemingly are going to get rescued, but again, it thwarts our expectations when only one of them gets rescued. And the final part of the film is the aftermath of the war. And one subject I found particularly unique and interesting was the subject of survivor's guilt, which I think Walken and especially De Niro have. And I like how this last part of the film kind of shows the reintegration of soldiers back into society and back into their old life and their old town after the war. The score is done by Stanley Myers, and I love it. It's just very simple. It's got guitar, there's some piano in there, but it has a very nostalgic feel to it and suits the film perfectly. Vilmo Zsigmond does the cinematography, and although I thought all the shots in this film were fantastic, especially the shots of them deer hunting in the mountains. Great supporting cast as well, all of the actors, but especially I think John Cazale, his humor in the film, it's a real standout, as well as John Savage, who plays a paraplegic after he gets back from the war. It doesn't feel like a Hollywood film to me, and it was shot in a time when directors had almost full creative control of the film, and I'd say it's my favorite POW film primarily because it has such a unique take on the POW genre. Alright guys, so that concludes our review of our top POW films.
Thanks to all of you for supporting us. All of our links are in the description. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button, because you guys are the reason we make these videos. Hasta la vista, babies.